All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about the cell. This is the absolute fundamental building block of all life as we know it. And what we're about to go through isn't just theory, it's the 100% accurate established science at the very heart of biology. So, to get a sense of what we're dealing with, just look at this number. That's roughly how many cells are in the average human body. 40 trillion. To put that in perspective, that's way more cells in you than there are stars in the entire Milky Way galaxy. And every single one is its own little universe, all working together. It's just incredible. You know, the name cell actually comes from the Latin word for small room. And when the first scientists peeked through a microscope, that's what they saw: tiny, empty rooms. But they had no idea they were looking at the most complex and bustling little cities imaginable. Because that's really what they are, the smallest part of any living thing that is itself truly alive. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll cover how we discovered these things. Then we'll look at the two main blueprints for all life. After that, we're going to shrink down and tour the inside of a cell, check out its command center and power plants. And finally, and this is my favorite part, we'll uncover the cell's built-in final program. So, first things first, where did this whole idea come from? How did we find a world that's completely invisible to us? Let's get into it. So our journey starts way back in 1665. A guy named Robert Hooke looks at a thin slice of cork and sees those small rooms. But the real breakthrough, the moment that changed everything, was in 1839 with the formal cell theory. It basically laid down the law. 1, all living things are made of cells, and 2, all new cells have to come from other cells. It's a story that started over 3.5 billion years ago with the very first life on Earth. Now, here's the thing. Not all cells follow the same blueprint. In fact, pretty much all life on this planet can be split into two fundamental designs. And here they are. On your left, you've got prokaryotic cells. These are the originals, the simple design. They don't have a real nucleus. Their DNA just kind of floats around. Think bacteria. On the right, you've got the eukaryotic cells. These are the complex ones, with a proper nucleus to hold the DNA and all sorts of other specialized parts called organelles. This is the design that makes up, well, us, and plants and fungi and pretty much everything you can see. Okay, so now we're going to zoom way in on one of those complex eukaryotic cells. I want you to imagine we're shrinking down, stepping inside a tiny, non-stop factory that's working right now to keep you alive. Welcome to the tour. First stop on the factory floor, it's got to be the assembly line. And in the cell, that's this massive, sprawling network called the endoplasmic reticulum, or just the ER. Think of it like a highway system and a manufacturing plant all rolled into one. And this isn't just one big assembly line. It's got specialized departments. The rough ER gets its name from being covered in these little dots called ribosomes, which are protein-making machines. Then you have the smooth ER, which handles things like fats and lipids. And there's even a super specialized version in our muscle cells that helps them contract. Talk about a custom job. Okay, so the ER is churning out all these proteins and fats. What happens next? Well, they get sent over to the Golgi body. This is the factory's shipping and receiving department, no question. The Golgi is like the master of logistics. It takes the products from the ER, inspects them, makes modifications, and then packages them into neat little bubbles to be shipped out. It makes sure everything gets to exactly where it needs to go, inside or even outside the cell. It's an absolute marvel of efficiency. It even manufactures some of the other machinery, which brings us to our next stop. Any busy factory is going to produce some trash, right? And you've got to have a cleanup crew. For the cell, that's the lysosomes. These guys are the waste disposal and recycling team. They're so powerful, they actually have the nickname suicide bags. So inside these little bags are some seriously potent digestive enzymes. They can dissolve almost anything: old cell parts, waste products, you name it. They're also our first line of defense, gobbling up invading viruses and bacteria. They keep the whole factory clean and safe, all while maintaining this intense acidic environment inside them, so they don't just digest the whole cell by accident. All right, let's leave the factory floor and head upstairs to the executive offices. Because any operation this complex needs two things: a brilliant CEO and a rock-solid power supply. And here's the CEO, the nucleus. This is Command Central. It's the brain of the whole operation. Every single instruction, every blueprint, every decision about the cell's life, its job, its future, it all comes from right here. Inside a fortress-like double membrane, the nucleus holds the most precious thing in the entire cell, the DNA. This is the code, the master blueprint for everything you are. The nucleus protects it, reads it, and sends out orders based on it. It's the ultimate control center. But all that manufacturing, all that decision-making, it takes a massive amount of energy. So where does the power come from? It comes from these guys, the famous powerhouse of the cell, the mitochondria. These are the power plants that keep the lights on for the whole factory. Mitochondria are energy-generating machines. They take the food we eat, break it down, and convert it into a molecule called ATP. That's the universal energy currency for pretty much all life on Earth. But here is where it gets absolutely wild. Mitochondria have their own DNA, completely separate from the nucleus. The theory is that billions of years ago, they were actually their own separate, tiny organisms that got swallowed by our ancient ancestors and just stayed. It's an incredible piece of our ancient history still living inside every single one of us. So we've seen how a cell is built, how it works, how it's powered, but what about the end of its life? This, to me, is maybe the most mind-blowing part of the whole story. So for our final section, let's talk about life's final program. Think about it. In a perfectly balanced system with 40 trillion parts, you can't just have cells breaking down and making a mess. It would be chaos. So what happens when a cell gets old or damaged or is just not needed anymore? The answer is just astounding. It's called programmed cell death. This isn't an accident, it's not a failure, it is a feature. It's literally a self-destruct sequence built into the cell's own programming. When it gets the signal, the cell systematically and cleanly takes itself apart, without causing any harm to its neighbors. And this process, which is usually called apoptosis, is absolutely essential for us to live. It's how our body gets rid of cells that could become cancerous. It's how we fight off certain infections. And one of the most amazing examples, when we're developing as an embryo, our hands and feet start out as little paddles. Apoptosis is the process that neatly carves out the spaces between our fingers and toes. We are literally sculpted by a program of cellular death. And that just leaves us with this one final thought. From the tiny factories to the power plants and the central command, the cell is a masterpiece of engineering. But if an orderly, precise, pre-written program for death is also built into every single one, what does that incredible level of control, from the very beginning of a cell's life to its very end, tell us about the nature of life itself?